Hi guys, and welcome back to Irony Completed. So this is a super chilled out, no makeup, pajamas February book club. So I'm going to be telling you guys the books that I read in February and the books that I am planning on reading in March in this book club. No haul because I haven't bought any books this month, which is really sad. But generally I don't buy books when I'm at university just because I've got so much to read that I can't think about like buying books for pleasure reading, but I am really excited to be able to read for pleasure a little bit over Easter. I mean, mostly I'm going to be revising. Let's start out with the books that I did read this month. There's not as many as I said I was going to read in last month's TBR, just because I had two really thick, boring books and I got about halfway through them and then gave up, unfortunately. So the two that I gave up on were Villette by Charlotte Bronte and Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens. I just couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. So I didn't read those in full. But why don't you get yourself a cup of tea and we'll talk about the books that I read in February. I drink at nighttime yogi bedtime tea, and it comes with little quotes on the like tea bag thing, and it says, "There is nothing more precious than self-trust." Sometimes they're really like pretentious and like funny and like gap year-y, and that always makes me laugh. Anyway, I did actually read 4 books in February, so that's still a reasonable amount. Well, 3 books and 1, well technically because 4 books and 1 short story I read in February, I should say. I read Rebecca, which I absolutely adored. I was really excited about reading this in my last month's book club, and I liked it just as much as I thought I would, and I also really enjoyed the movie. This is about a unnamed narrator who moves into her new husband's house and is living in the shadow of her husband's ex-wife, Rebecca. And it's just really interesting. If you've seen the Hitchcock film and you like that, then you should definitely give the book a read because it's absolutely fantastic. The writing style of this is magical. There is literally no other word for it than magical. It's so enchanting and I really enjoyed this book. Sticking with Daphne du Maurier, I also read The Birds, which is a very short story. And I really enjoyed it, although someone did comment on my last book club video, I can't remember who, I'm sorry, but someone commented and said that they were interested to see how I took The Birds because it's so different from the film, and they were definitely right. It is very different from the film. The short story is much more compacted, and it's also set during the Cold War, so it's a Cold War analogy, which is really interesting, and I just really enjoyed it. I mean, it's basically the same plot in that like birds attack, but it's much more focused on one farmer's family, and that's very interesting. It's much more moving than the film. I felt much more emotionally connected to these characters in the short story, even though you don't find out much about them. And just generally, I really love du Maurier's writing style, and I thought that this was a fantastic short story, and I'm actually really interested to read some of the other short stories in this volume because I haven't read any of the others yet, but I know that there are quite a few famous short stories that she wrote. The other books that I read this month were The Great Gatsby. I reread this probably for the 5th or 6th time. I've read this so many times since I first read it, and it's absolutely one of my favourite books. I don't think I need to describe it any more than that. It's just fantastic. Such a great portrait of the Jazz Age and the Roaring Twenties and the hollowness of America at the time. Absolutely fantastic. If you haven't read it already, who the fuck are you? You should read it. And I also read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and also Alice Through the Looking Glass. Both of these are absolutely fantastic. Obviously children's stories. I'm sure most people are familiar with these stories, but they are very nonsensical and magical and fantastical, and I really enjoyed them. It was a nice reprieve from some of the other Victorian literature that I was reading on this module, but generally I really did enjoy both of these. I thought they were really fun and lighthearted, but it's also really interesting to kind of like try and analyse it in a literary sense, which really great stories. If you haven't read them already, then I think you should, because it'll make you wish that you read them when you were a child. And the last thing that I read this month was The Postman Always Rings Twice by James M. Cain. Another really short book. It was only a couple hundred pages. I really enjoyed this. I've never read a James Cain novel before, but I have watched several adaptations of his films. Lots of his books were made into movies in the film noir genre. Double Indemnity was one, and this was made into a movie. I did do this on my adaptations module. I enjoyed the film and I enjoyed the book. It was a very like tabloid journalism-esque book, but he was a journalist, so that makes sense. It was also based on a true crime, which is really exciting. If you don't know the plot of this book, it basically is about a true life story in which a like couple are having an affair against the wife's husband's back, and they plot to murder the husband. And it's great. It's so like fast paced. It's a really, really quick read because it's so small, but also just because it's so like punchy and racy, really, really easy to get lost in the storyline. And psychologically it's really interesting, but also it's just really interesting from a like action crime novel kind of standpoint, and I just really, really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. I'm definitely interested in reading Double Indemnity, the novel, and some other of James M. Cain's novels as well after reading this. Fantastic. I always seem to be filming these videos when I'm not wearing any makeup. Do you guys like my bare face? Well, I just made that Power of Makeup video where I said that I love my bare face, so you guys know how I stand on the matter. I also couldn't be bothered to do anything with like my fringe or anything though, so I just was not... I went to the gym this morning and did like an hour of cardio, and then I did a body pump class which involved like weights and stuff. I was dying. 2 hours of exercise, I was dying. That's more than I ever do in one sitting. I can't really raise my arms properly. And after that I just like couldn't be bothered to put makeup on again after I went to those exercise classes. Like I had a shower and I couldn't be bothered to put makeup on to film, but I'm out of the house all day tomorrow and I need to like edit this and get it up for Sunday, blah 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 blah. You know how it is. Anyway, back to the actual point of this video. So I am now going to tell you guys the books that I am planning on reading in March. This is my March TBR list. And if you do not know what TBR stands for, it stands for to be read. So let's get into it. The first one is a comic book. The first one is a comic book, which is really oh my god. The first one is a comic book, which is really exciting. This is Sin City: The Hard Goodbye, which I think is the first volume in the Sin City comics. This is about Marvin and Goldie's story. Marvin seeking revenge on the people who killed Goldie. I'm doing this for adaptation because obviously Sin City, the whole series of comic books, was made into a very, very famous adaptation, which I think was directed by the same guy who wrote the comic books, which is awesome, and obviously is going to be really interesting to study. Spoiler alert, this is going to be on my March book club in the red pile because I've already read this. I finished it today, but I didn't want to include it in the red pile February because it is already like the 4th of March. So I have read some other Sin City comic books before because my mum is really into them, and I think the one that I read was Booze, Broads and Bullets, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, I really enjoyed this. I definitely want to read the others actually because obviously each one is a different element of the story in the film, which is really interesting. But I really love this, and I will talk about it more next month. I am reading 2 other things for adaptations this month, and one of them is Pride and Prejudice. I've read this before though, so I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to reread it because I didn't really enjoy it the first time around that I read it. Not to say that I don't love the story. I am enamoured with the story, and I love the BBC adaptation and the Keira Knightley adaptation. We're actually studying the Bollywood adaptation though, which is super exciting. I love Pride and Prejudice, it's great. But I have read this before, and I do find Austen very, very difficult to get through in terms of the writing style. I find generally Victorian novels very, very difficult to get through, but I might try and reread it just to see if I can form a definite opinion about whether I like or dislike this book. Hopefully I can get through it, but no promises. And for adaptations, the third book that I am reading is Shakespeare's Macbeth, so technically a play, not a book. I have studied this before. I think I studied this like way back, even before GCSE was a thing, maybe or maybe at GCSE, I can't quite remember, but I have read this before. I am going to reread it because it's a play and it's very, very short and easy to get through. Macbeth is probably my favourite Shakespeare tragic play, and my favourite Shakespeare comic play is Twelfth Night. Yeah. So I really am looking forward to rereading this because I haven't read it in a while, and I do really like Shakespeare. I'm also reading 3 books / 2 books and some short stories, I should say, for the Victorian literature module that I'm doing. One of them, again, I'm not 100% sure whether I'm going to reread this or if I'm just gonna skim read it or just leave it because I read it in the summer. This is my favourite book, probably tied with The Great Gatsby and Lolita. They're like my top 3. I don't really have an order of those. Picture of Dorian Gray, I absolutely adore this book. I read it over the summer for the first time and I fell in love with it immediately. I think I probably will reread it just because I got through it very quickly the first time, if I'm remembering correctly, and I really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, it's just one of my favourite books. Like I said, this, The Great Gatsby and Lolita are kind of always in my top 3 favourite books, but they kind of like jump around a little bit, and like one day I'll say The Great Gatsby is my all-time favourite, one day I'll say this, one day I'll say Lolita, but they're kind of like tied for first place. Probably will reread this. Love this book. Absolutely love this book. I love Oscar Wilde so much. I love his plays and his poetry too. But yeah, I'm really excited to be studying this, like really excited, because I think I'm going to write an essay on it. The book that I'm actually going to start reading probably tomorrow is King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard. This is about colonization of Africa and like mining diamonds, I think. I'm not 100% sure because I've never read this before and I've never seen the film versions of it before. I'm actually kind of excited to read this simply because I know very little about it, and also because it's so different to some of the other things that we've been reading on the Victorian literature course, in that it is set in Africa and that it is about colonization, and maybe it's going to give a little bit of insight into that. I don't really know, but let me know what your guys' thoughts on this book are. If you've read it, will I enjoy it? Hopefully I will. And lastly, I'm reading a few short stories. I can't remember exactly which ones. The only one that I can remember is The Yellow Wallpaper, which I already read and I love. This is a collection of short stories by Victorian women. It's called Women Who Did, stories by men and women 1890 to 1914. And we're reading a collection of short stories by women in this period in this collection. So I'm super excited about that because I feel like female writers are so often overlooked, and I always enjoy studying things by female writers, especially if they have feminist undertones or just kind of like interesting psychological things that you can criticize and analyze and stuff. So I'm super excited to read this. Very excited. Like I've said, excited so much in this video, but you guys are just gonna have to deal with it. So that's everything for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, then please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It's free. If you guys want to, then please let me know down in the comments the books that you enjoyed in February, or the books that you read and absolutely hated in February. Give me some recommendations for stuff to read over Easter as well, that would be great. And also you can let me know the books that you are planning on reading in the next couple of months too. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye!